The Marine Corps requires leaders of all ranks to have a deep understanding of war and the employment of force. MCDP 1 reminds Marines that the military profession is a thinking profession. Every Marine is expected to be a student of the art and science of war. It goes on to say that every Marine has an individual responsibility to study the profession of arms. Self directed study in the art and science of war is at least equal in importance to maintaining physical condition and should receive at least equal time. The Marine Corps Association understands the critical importance of ensuring that Marines are as mentally ready for combat as they are physically ready. That is why we offer an entire page dedicated to wargaming on our website. We have recommendations for both tabletop board games as well as computer games. And for Marine Corps Association members, there is a discount code for war game design studios that you can find on the website. War games are a great way to immerse yourself in history and to put yourself in the shoes of the great leaders of history. Go beyond guided instruction and experience the thrill of wargaming. Check us out at mca-marines.org/decision making exercises/wargaming 2. That's mca-marines.org/decision making exercises/wargaming 2. Take your training to the next level.
Hello, audience. Welcome back to another installment of World of Wargaming from the MCA Scuttlebutt podcast. I'm William. Today we're here with a returning guest, Colonel Don Vandergriff, retired from the U.S. Army, to discuss how to do after-action reviews for wargaming. Don, how are you today?
I'm doing a lot better. Thank you, Bill, and glad to see you again.
Awesome. Well, appreciate having you coming back on the show. So to start off, the first question I'm going to ask is, how do we conduct after action reviews for wargaming, and how does that compare to when you do them normally in the field?
Well, after action reviews for wargaming, as a matter of fact, any learning event where you're doing some type of competitive engagement or critical thinking engagement, it's important to conduct the after action review. It's the tie or the final seal to learning, and it has to be done correctly. So there's incorrect ways. I have observed thousands of AARs over my career, and I've written books on how to do them better. And I teach a workshop, which I hope one day I can get you to see, to observe on how to do AARs. The workshop's not just about AARs, it's about how to learn about Boyd's OODA loop and the mission command through problem solving. But as we do the problem solving, the students learn how to do the AAR properly. So what most AARs are is in the military side and the private side. I've taught both law enforcement, first responders, DC Fire Department, DC Police Departments, a few of my recent customers, clients, great people. But the AAR is generally, I always start off with, okay, after I define what an AAR, the students do all the talking, which is key in the AAR for the audience, the people that are supposed to be learning to do most of the talking and talk about the issues they had with the problem. So regardless if it's a war game or a free play exercise in the field or just any kind of training event where learning is occurring, the people have to themselves say, this is what we did and this is how we're going to fix it. But what usually occurs is just the opposite. On the military side, it'll be a colonel that comes in, a sergeant major, and they'll do all the talking. And as a result, people shut down after a few minutes. No matter how popular the colonel, I've worked for some great brigade commanders, and I have great friends that are sergeant majors, but that's one-sided. That's top down. Another technique that is well proven is give me 3 good things and 3 bad things you did, and we'll talk about them. The problem with that is, again, someone that is not involved with learning directly. I mean, they may have observed, like observer controllers at a training center, which I did for 2.5 years at the National Training Center. where I really started working on how to do after action reviews correctly, that's not getting it either. Okay. So the first thing you start with is if you're doing a war game, like you and I have played some great war games. And by the way, you're an incredible opponent and I applaud you. You really gave me an ass kicking on this last Arab Israeli because you identified the very weakness of the Arab forces. The Arab forces had overwhelming superiority, but they had a horrible command and control system, which was a Soviet Russian control system, which is very methodical and fight battles in phases with massive artillery and air support. Uh, and when the Egyptians did that initially with crossing the canal, they stuck to their plan. They did what they were trained for by the Soviets, and they defeated the Israelis. But once the Israelis were allowed to freely maneuver, then it turned the tables the on the whole campaign. And you realize that if I stick to how the Arabs really fought, I'm going to get beat. So you fought like the Germans fought, but you had numbers. That's great. That's what war games are about. So with that example, you go in and say, what are we wanting to learn out of this? Well, let's say it's command and control. So I will write a card down if you and I are the guys that are like I used to run a lot of war games with my cadets. I used to run a lot of war games with students. I might be invited down to, it's not a sealed deal yet, but I'm being asked to go down to a major army installation after my knees both get repaired. I have bad knees when I can walk again and conduct an army staff on how to do Kriegsspiels, wargaming in German. They're the ones who really originated the art of wargaming, the art of AARs. So when you do a war game, or regardless of the type of war game, you're like, what do I really want to get out of this learning environment? And another mistake is when people do a whole bunch of things. They try to do everything. And I try to tell people at the most, maybe go in there to talk about three things, three major areas. Watch some learning that goes on with that, and then come in and facilitate is the key word, using the Socratic method. Okay. You want to guide the client, the students, the cadets, the lieutenants, whatever, toward those things you wanted them to get the most of in from the event. Another guy that's really good at that, and I know you've met him and interviewed him, is Dr. Goodmanson.
We haven't
He
got to yet. We hopefully can at one point.
Bruce and I are very close friends. I mean, family friends. We see each other all the time, and he taught me a lot of many things. But Bruce is a really good facilitator of an AAR. Same thing. He'll go in there and say, so taking our example of the 73 war, Yom Kippur War, if we were students playing that game and we had observers, I would focus on the C2 aspect. And I would ask each side, what did you see what the other side did that that either surprised you or you learned from? And let them do the talking. And I would say, well, the Egyptians did not stop. I was playing the game to what I knew historically, which I was. And I expected you to stop, and because most of your points for the game are holding the canal on the east side. Uh, and you didn't do that, which was great. You continued to push on. Okay, so that surprised me. Not like I was freaking out, but I'm like, oh wow, he's going to beat my mobilization table, which you did, and you were eating me up piecemeal. But it has to come from us. You see what I'm saying? And normally it's the opposite. So if it comes from you and I, what we both saw, and it's the same thing with mistakes. The best AR I saw is when I go, I anticipated this and this happened. And because I based my decision making on the wrong assumptions, he did this to me. That is gold mine. You understand why?
How so?
It's a gold mine because that person just admitted I did this. I assumed it was wrong after I saw what happened, and this is why I did it. and now you're capable of learning from it. That's the biggest downfall. We have created not only a military but society where admitting to your mistakes is not a good thing. And that's the biggest thing, the biggest area where learning occurs. Okay. When we have what's sad, Bill, is we have an incredible amount of tools that teach critical thinking in conflict driven environments. War game being the one you and I know very well. The other ones are staff rides like you and I give tours or battlefield tours. And even during tours that I give to regular civilians at Brandy Station, I facilitate them. I have them answer their own questions because psychologically they are more involved. They take ownership of the learning. And that's what you want an AR to be. Uh, but too often egos get in the way and people stand up there. And most of the time, you know, they're the most knowledgeable person in the room or in the car or whatever. Okay, but you use that knowledge. My best example is the Yoda of AARs. When you watch Star Wars, Yoda, what did Yoda continually do? He was a knowledge of all things, but he wanted the Jedi to learn by engaging them with questions, learning through doing. Okay, it's the same thing because if you learn through doing and then admit, hey, I need more work, but I'm allowed to make a mistake. A pain-free environment is what it's called, where you can make mistakes and the only pain is to yourself that I could have learned more or I didn't admit that I could learn more. That's great. That's the kind of learning environment we want because it's better to learn it now when you and I are sitting here at our computer or we're watching students in a sterile environment and they are allowed to correct themselves before they actually get out and do it. You see what I'm doing? Saying so.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that, Don. That was a good explanation overview. So, as the audience is now learning, Don and I just recently played the 1973 Yom Kippur War on through Wargame Design Studio. We had a great fight, bloodbath as always. It's never easy with you, Don. It always goes to hell and chaos really quickly. So, how we're going to proceed from now for our audience is we're going to first do a quick historical analysis, talk about the context of the Yom Kippur War, so that the audience understands. What we're working with, and then we'll go ahead and conduct our own brief AAR of just so we can give the audience an idea of how they go. So, Don, as the resident historian of the Yom Kippur War, which admittedly I know very little of, go ahead and give us the quick background about it.
Well, the reason I know a lot about it now, I have Israeli historian friends, Martin Van Crevel, Eaton Samor, both noted military historians in Israel, and then some military experts like Doug McGregor and Wolf Olin, who were far more knowledgeable than I, as well as how to apply it to learning. But I study it constantly. The big reason was the U.S. Army after the war put in an incredible amount of effort to understand the war, and they transitioned their doctrine to a new form of doctrine. Not the air land battle that came later in the 80s, but a methodical battle. Okay, so I know all the history of that. But the Yom Kippur War was a war fought during the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. Uh, and unlike the 67 war, where the Israelis wanted a decisive campaign of maneuver and crush the Egyptians and the Syrians, as well as the Jordanians, taking the West Bank, Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights and the Sinai. In this war, the Israelis had gotten very confident in their combined arms, and the tank became the centerpiece, and they were very overconfident. There were signs of something was brewing, but the Israelis, at the urging of the Egyptian, or the Arabs at the urging of the uh, Egyptians, did a coalition. And on the day of the Yom Kippur, the Syrians would do a massive tank offensive against the Golan Heights, which dominated northern Israel, and the Egyptians would seize the east bank of the Sinai Canal. Okay. What was very interesting about that was the introduction of two new weapons to counter the strengths of the Israelis. One was the surface to air missiles, or the SAMs, SA-7 specifically, SA-6. I don't know if there's any other ones, which the Israelis were surprised by. It was the latest Soviet technology. And the second one was the anti-tank guided missile, or the Sagger missile, the suitcase Sagger, which gave infantry a way for the first time in a long time to counter the tank. It gave them a tank killer, which was wire guided, had a range of 3,000 meters. It could be carried by infantry, which the Egyptians particularly studied and trained how to do it. And so that's the war. It was about a week-long war until the United States brokered a peace deal, because after a week, the Israelis were crossing the Suez Canal and they were attacking Damascus, the capital of Syria. But how that they turned around, because in the first 3 or 4 days, as you demonstrated when you played, the Israelis were almost entirely overrun. The uh, Syrians made it to the bridges the uh, over the Jordan River. Almost made it there and captured them, which would give them passage into northern Israel. And the Egyptians, through an incredible methodical battle, successfully crossed the Suez Canal, and then they dug in under their SAM umbrella, and they defeated the first Israeli counterattacks conducted on the 7th and 8th of October. But then the Syrians, having been ground short of their objective, begged Anwar Sadat, the president of Egyptian, to continue the attacks against the advice of his general staff, because they knew they would be playing in the hands of the Israelis. They conducted a major attack 2 days later, 3 days after the start of the war, when the Israelis were able to call up three of their divisions and they were massively defeated. The Israelis then conducted a counterattack, and crossing the lower Suez Canal, they crossed and then eventually surrounded the Third Egyptian Army, which forced the Americans to get in before there was Russian intervention and stop the war. So that's as much of a summary as I can give you on the war.
Well, awesome. Thank you for that. Because I remember, especially like the Marine Corps Gazette even paid certain attention to detail to a lot of the Israeli wars against the Arab states, just because of their application of maneuver warfare. So it's highly relevant. I definitely recommend that our audience look into it and study the Yom Kippur War. So then let's get on and start our One. I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah. Well, my plan was to try to conduct a count. The Israelis did have a mechanized division on standby when the Egyptians would cross the canal. And I was banking, though you are an incredible war gamer with Civil War and other periods I played you in, I was thinking that you would be more inexperienced with modern warfare, and I could conduct a counterattack on the north side, north flank, and drive. While meanwhile, I was going to hold the Golan Heights as the Israelis did, and unwilling to lose the Golan Heights until my reserves were called up, which is 3 or 4 days later into the war. And you do get really good, capable reserves. That's a hallmark of the Israeli army. And once they're available, conduct a counterattack to retake both. My priority effort was with the Sinai front, the Sinai Peninsula front, even though I had more ground to give him, but the ground in the north around the Golan at the Jordan River is more defensible. So my counterattack failed, and then you surprised me by continuing the attack. You never paused, which was good. I was expecting you to pause, gather. I thought your reinforcements would take longer to move up, and that would give me time to build up the strength, and it didn't. You also surprised me on the Golan Heights, even though I stuck largely to defending breakthrough points that you made through the minefields. You got through them quicker than I thought, and furthermore, I stuck to my plan. I wasn't flexible. I fed all my reserves that should have gone in the north into the Sinai, and as we ended, because I felt ill for a while. As 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 we closed, I was getting those reinforcements to the Sinai, but I was losing northern Israel to your Syrians. So that's my capstone. My mistake was not using ground for time and underestimating your initial moves and not leaving any reserves for the go long front, because the Jordan River is an incredible barrier to armored forces. And I didn't have anything left. I had things left, but in the game rules, they have fixed units where, for real reality reasons, they leave units where you can't use them until they're threatened. To say, oh, I still have a threat I don't know about from Jordan or from the Lebanese or from the militias up in Lebanon. So even though I wanted to redeploy those forces, which would have probably been sufficient to hold you, I couldn't get them unfixed. So at that point, you had a breakthrough into Tel Aviv, I think, and there's nothing else I could do before I finally had all my forces moving in the south, 3 divisions, but with my northern front crumbling, it was time to call defeat.
All right. So my plan was a little less sophisticated. I went into to the war not knowing really much historically. So my idea of victory was, stereotypical Arab: blow Israel off the map, liberate Jerusalem, burn Tel Aviv to the ground. That was generally my thought process. So I wasn't thinking incrementally as they were historically. I was thinking like this is going to be a war of total victory or whatnot. My biggest concern, obviously, was the technological parity. You did mention we had good SAMs and good anti-take teams, but I was definitely worried about armor, especially going up against head-to-head with yours. And so, in my main effort, which was the Egyptian front, I realized that if I try to go toe-to-toe with your armor, I would get chewed to pieces, and a lot of my units did get chewed to pieces. So I just instinctively fell back on maneuver warfare. Realized, if I can get your units surrounded, get them isolated, that their combat efficiency would go down. And I just try to apply that on a large scale. When you launch a counterattack, which retook some of the bridge heads that I had over the Suez, I panicked slightly, but then I realized, this doesn't have to be the end of the world. I have a couple armored divisions free, so I sent them north to cut off your assault, surround them, and then play to my advantage. In the Jordanian front, my tactics were piss poor. I didn't really know many mechanics about clearing mines, clearing the breaches, so I took a lot of heavy casualties early on, and was able to get, though, after a while, get a few toeholds. And then once I got into position where I was able to actually inflict casualties upon you in the Syrian front, then I was just trying to edge for a breakthrough. Try north, try south, try center, find a weakness. And then once I found that weakness, I was like, okay, it was almost like the Germans in the Battle of the Bulge. It's just like, doesn't matter how many men I lose, just get across the Jordan River, as many men as you can, and then move from there. And so I again, as you noted, I try to employ more maneuverist tactics to try to surround your forces and to equal out the technological parity and advantages you had over me. By the time we ended the game, I was running into your reserves, my assault was pretty much reaching its culminating point. I had a few divisions that I was reorganizing, but otherwise, it was going to come to a point when I was going to need to stop, and take stock and reorganize, because again, I was throwing divisions from one army group to another to support another army group. Brigades are getting mixed up. I was really, that's, I guess, one of the difficulties of maneuver warfare, is that if you don't maintain good command and control, you're going to reach a culminating point earlier than you intend to. So yeah, so that was generally my battle plan.
That's great. The thing that we've got to realize, the Marine Corps has a new wargaming center going in, and my fear, along with some of my friends that are considered wargaming experts. Have you met Eric Walters yet?
I have not.
Okay, Eric Walters, I'll hook you up. You have not. He is considered the wargaming expert of the Marine Corps. He's working for IDA right now in Alexandria. We just talked 2 weeks ago. We're good friends with Bill Lynn and Bruce. But Eric will tell you the worst thing you can do. The Germans would tell you this is that war game is a great learning tool, but you want it to answer, or you want it to create more questions than you answer.
Mhm.
What you don't want to use with a war game is it's going to go in to answer a certain question, solve a problem. It's not supposed to do that. Godurian in all his interviews, particularly it was right on May, near the end of the 6-week campaign against France. They went back, yeah, it was right after the campaign. He went back to Sedan, and German newspapers said this was the miracle of Sedan. He said, no, it wasn't. We had a good idea of what we wanted to do, or at least the options, because we had war gamed it 33 times since the fall of France before May 10th, our fall of Poland until up to May 10th. What it did for us, it gave us a lot of things to solve. Okay. So that's what you want to do with it. One of the big things they had to solve was how to keep the 100-kilometer long columns supplied with fuel. And another one was what was the best mix when they got to Sedan to cross there. Okay. And it wasn't tanks, it was enough infantry and artillery. And Stuka solved that problem with lack of artillery because they became what Guderian called the flying artillery. So again, that in our game, if we were playing it for decision makers somewhere, those were the things, those are the points we would want to bring out. How do you maintain your momentum? That was important. How do I create enough reserves in case I have to hold one front and the enemy did what you did in the Sinai, just continue to move, and it blew my timetable. I still had a division locked up, by the way, just to the south of where I surrounded some of your guys.
Mhm.
There was a whole mechanized division I couldn't. I was supposed to get it the next day, which would have gave me 3 divisions up there, but it was fixed. So those are things that I question myself, and then I always go back and say, how would I play this different now? And those are things you want to do. The other thing I've done, I don't know if I've done it with you yet, but I have done it with a couple other opponents when we
Mhm.
were playing a lot, was we'd switch sides. There in our league, you probably have seen this too. Guys like you and I and a couple other my guys, we want to talk about what we learned from the game.
Mhm.
There's a lot of guys that just do it for entertainment. That's fine.
Mhm.
Okay, that's what they were created for. I use them as an education tool, and I used to use them with recommend them clients and how to learn, and then how to learn from them. So the thing that we may want to do once I get through my surgeries is go back and play, or even play like the 67 campaign, but trade sides.
Mhm.
Because the best thing you and I have always done is we always do a summary of what we learned from it. Okay. And that I just like that. I like, what did I not do right? Because I always want to be better. If you're playing war games correctly, where there's a lot of fog and friction, you're going to make mistakes.
Mhm.
Okay. It's too complicated to be perfect. So you've got to be able to take the results and say the first big step is leave the ego at the door. Why did I not do? I had what was cool was what you talking about. You were reaching your culminating point. I was seeing that in a Sinai. I was getting frustrated because if I can just hold northern Israel a little bit longer, I can counterattack. And I did sense that, but like I said, I couldn't. I've had 3 brigades up there that were fixed, and I couldn't. There was nothing I can do there, and I couldn't find where they were going to be released. The timeline. They were released if you start attacking them somewhere.
Mhm.
Okay, so, but instead of using excuses, I got to say, what caused me to have to rely on people that I didn't need, I shouldn't have to rely on? That's the bigger issue. And once we get to that level as a leader or as an analyst or as a staff officer, uh, we're able to learn a lot more. So that's my viewpoint on it.
All right. So going back to then our AR, so we've gone over our battle plans. How else would we then proceed? So I guess you said you had 3 things you could did good with, and 3 things you did poorly. So want to go ahead and try that out?
Well, the things I always focus on war games is C2 and logistics, and then logistics include the mobilization of forces. What I did poorly was I had a plan, but I didn't rely on an entire timeline of when my forces would be released. I looked at it, but a mistake I make too often is not spending some prep time. I try to avoid, and not unfortunately, but I know the history of most of all the games we play. A lot of people don't. I always tell them, well, go review the history. There's nothing wrong with that. But what's more important is to take those, and they give you when the releases are, and then you build your plan around that. That's reality. They really have a mobilization table. They know, like that last brigade I finally got released, which had the T-55s and T-62, well, T-55s. I was using it as a stopgap. I shouldn't have to do that. I should have built my plan like the Israelis did around my mobilization tables. Okay. That was my biggest error right there. So yeah, making the counterattack early because I was going for a knockout blow. And like you said, it kind of made you panic a little bit. Maybe in a real war, the downfall of war games, and I said it in a kind of a quick essay I wrote on the wargaming opponent thing on Facebook, was when I'm sitting there in a perfectly climate room with my socks and shorts on, with a glass of hot tea, and my biggest concern, if maybe my wife gets mad at me because I'm in my office too long, then it takes one of the biggest factors in war. I beat the opponent's mind. Most battles are won or lost because I beat the opponent's mind. Okay. Stuart won at Brandy Station, because he never let the Union beat him, but he beat Pleasanton in his mind. Lee won against Hooker against 2-1 odds because he beat Hooker's mind. Okay. Now there's other places like Gettysburg where the Union Army was the big factor, and Lee's not adapting his command style to the battle, which caused the defeat. But a lot of times it's you and me, and in a war game, if you're really knowledgeable like you are about the mechanics, then that gives you the confidence where you can have a setback and you're pretty sure you're going to overcome it. The one war game where we played after North Anna on the way to Cold Harbor, where you had crossed the Pomonacony River, and I just was relentless. I didn't let up because I knew if I let up, you being the master of mechanics of the game would be able to get a breather and get the Union strength. So in this game, I was thinking if I counterattack early, but I did that without looking at the call up of my reserves. That was my big error in that game. And that because of that, I left after I got beat on the goal line. My northern flank was not totally void, but there was a gap there that I couldn't cover. So,
All right. And then in my case, I think what I did poorly was really researching the tactics of the era, and especially in the Syrian front, that just hamstrung me of not employing your engineers, your obstacle clearers first, then your tanks. I mean, I was getting caught up in minefields, getting cut to pieces. I almost just thought that like the entire Syrian front was going to be failed. But then once I grasped the mechanics better and figured out there is actually, this isn't invincible. There is a way to get a toehold on these Israelis. I was able to clear. And then I think my biggest strength was then just was remaining flexible, and looking at the situation in Egypt, on the Egyptian front especially, and realizing that there's opportunity in your first counterattack where I could potentially cut your forces off between the Sinai and the sea, and work from there.
yep, you did. You did excellent. I kept telling you in emails when we were going back and forth, we were continually AR too, and that's good too. Like I said, I've got a couple other opponents we do that back and forth while we're playing. We don't give away each other's plan. Now I did that one time. I said, "Oh, good." I got lucky when you had tried to circle me one last time. I said, "Oh, my reserves." I said, I love your aggression, but I got fate, my reserve, and that told you what I was pulling reserves down.
Yeah, I was like, okay, so those reserves are not going to Syria. It's just boys, it meets back on the menu. You cross the Jordan River, baby, and then but yeah, that does happen every once in a while in a few games. Like someone will say something, whether it's in jest or just in conversation, and then it'll cue me in on.
Yeah, that's what I did. I was saying it in conversation, not thinking that, oh, this will really give it away. And that's what really happened. My brigades were just hitting while you were trying to encircle that one division. It was war's a lot of chance. And as I say, luck. I mean, I had planned for them to come down and stage a big, massive counteroffensive and just hit the right time. But by me telling you that, by what I said, but again, as a learning point, because I'm a teacher too, so I tend, while I want to win the game, I also tend to want to teach people. I just got a couple of compliments on the WDS opponent site about where this guy came up and said, "You taught me a lot how to play better." Because I love to teach, and if a guy's willing to learn or learn from it, it's just funner that way. Okay, so that's a habit that I'm just into because I've always been a teacher and I always try to be the best teacher I can. So that comes out too. But still, there's nothing wrong with that. You took some intel and used it, and that's cool.
Well, yeah. Well, anyways, like I said, Don, it was a great game. Again, like none of your the games against you are easy. They're all bloodbaths. Good. We go way beyond the historical casualty count, which is just a sign of a good war game, at least in my opinion. So, do you have any projects that you just come out or release that you want to plug or talk about, or?
But the bigger one that you've helped me on is Bill Lynn and General Dubik and I wrote the new Maneuver Warfare Handbook. And what your audience will be pleased about, it's going to be available on hard drive on Amazon now with it any day now. Even though the guy that publishes it, one of my best cadets ever, and he's a former special forces officer that got wounded. He's good now, but he runs all these different training companies, and one of his training companies publishes great books on special tactics. They were doing the hard copy, the hard copy of it instead of the Kindle version, and people were having trouble. Like Eric Walters tried to order several from their site, and it didn't work very well. So now they're going to be on Amazon. But the difference in that book and the original in 1985 is we talked a lot more about learning. I have an entire annex I wrote, Annex B, on outcomes based learning. And then there's a chapter on learning in the book itself where Bill talks about the impact that my work's made on a lot of places. So what's interesting about that is I'm not a white tower, Ivy Tower theorist. Yeah, I've got a lot of education, a lot of hard work, but I've taken what I've developed and put it to practice. And a lot of companies and organizations, military, non-military, have benefited from that. And a lot of what we just talked about is in there. So the reader that may be familiar, I've already gotten a couple emails from sergeant majors in the Marine Corps who said, what I like about I like the old one. I still have a copy with green tape on the end of it, but the new copy talks a lot more about how to set up a learning system, a PME, to learn from what you guys wrote. It's more centric to learning. The Annex A is the tactics part. And the original, my good friend and mentor, Mike Wiley, wrote Annex A, which was teaching tactics at the AWS course where he was chief of tactics. And what we did even more is we really talk about the learning acts, how to take a learning methodology and teach maneuver warfare. So that's the biggest project right now. Until after I get my knees replaced, I'm just going to be low key about stuff. Because I'm really spending a lot of time getting physically fit again. While I've been sick, I got unhealthy. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time on that. A lot, just with my nature, I'll work on something else. But I've done 3 books over the last 2 years. The new Maneuver Warfare, which was a great coordinated effort with Bill Lynn, General Dubik, and the owner of Special Tactics. And then we did a outcomes-based learning handbook, which is the whole book, 140 pages, is all about how to apply outcomes-based learning. And then we did a professional development book that talks about all the different tools. It expands on what the LBO handbook talks about. And if I was commanding general, I'm giving you a roadmap here after a detailed decades-long analysis of the best PMEs in the world through history. you can, if you really want to adapt maneuver warfare, like God rest his soul, General Gray, who just passed away yesterday, and I was good friends with him. If you want to really, and he had a great PME, but he realized for me to implement maneuver warfare in the 2nd Marine Division, I had to have a great PME program. So he started doing TDGs and some war games, staff rides, and then he turned all their exercises into free play force on force exercise. So the book really goes into that. So those are my projects, but not for a few months. I won't be doing anything but getting better.
All right. Well, Don, thank you again for coming on the show. It's always great to have you on. To our guest, go check out his book. I'll post a link in the description, especially the new Maneuver Warfare Handbook, and potentially, hopefully, we'll get a review out there soon. But Don, again, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Always good to see young people like you that are really hitting our profession, making it better, and keep up the great work.
Well, much obliged. Well, thanks again, audience, for tuning in. We'll see you all soon.
Okay, bye.
A common axiom is that those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Another axiom is that we sweat in peace so that we don't bleed in war. Here at the Marine Corps Association, we fully understand both. That is why we offer through our professional development page on our website a comprehensive catalog of battle studies, tactical and ethical decision games, and war games to ensure that not only do we learn from the past, but we embrace the thoughts and decisions that influence the outcomes of some of the greatest actions of the Marine Corps. We have tools and techniques that will enhance both unit training as well as enable comprehensive self-study. Check out all that the Marine Corps Association has to offer on our website. Go to mca-marines.org/professional-development. That's mca-marines.org/professional-development and get your reps and sets in. Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. You have heard the voices or contributions from Major Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Litchman, William Truding, and our guest. Ty Frazier is the editor, sound engineer, and technical producer. The Marine Corps Association is not an agency of the U.S. government. The opinions expressed in this episode are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the official position of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the Marine Corps Association.